Today on Locked On Canadiens, is Nick Suzuki true number one center in the NHL?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1111 of Locked On Canadiens. We thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Metlove. Habs Eyes on the Prize coming up on, we've got about a couple weeks left of Scott. And Scott, how are you doing on this extremely hot, humid weekend?
I am begging Kent Hughes to literally do anything right now. We have officially reached that part of the summer where, hey, they signed a fringe fourth liner is an episode's worth of is big news. Is an episode's worth of content. Like, we've talked about why they're not doing entry level contracts and stuff. I'm just waiting on anything. I don't know where Kent Hughes is right now. He may be taking a well-deserved vacation, but Kent, if you're in the Maldives, I know your cell phone still works, and you can negotiate an Arbor Jackeye extension from the beach or something. Give us something, please.
Give us something. So one person who has given us something is listener who has given us this idea for an episode. This comes from Jeffers, and the question was, is Nick Suzuki a number one center? Are there really 32 centers or 31, I guess, centers in the NHL that are better than him? So today we kind of decided to talk about this because this is a very frequent debate in our community. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again up until the Canadiens win a Stanley Cup. We will be talking about whether or not Nick Suzuki is a true number one center they need. So I was thinking first about talking about Nick Suzuki's merits just as a player before going into whether or not, there are better centers than him available to the Montreal Canadiens. I think specifically one thing that Nick Suzuki has been able to do is plot out his vision for every play that he makes. He's able to anticipate play really, really well. He's got the speed to back it up. He has the intelligence to back it up, but the way that he's able to anticipate and react is, I think, one of his strongest suits. Scott, would you agree?
Yeah. The thing about Nick Suzuki is that everyone's like, oh, is he a first-line center? Look at his point totals, ignoring the context around the Montreal Canadiens is the biggest thing. I know my answer to this already, but like to kind of expand on it, I get why there is constantly this debate, because you see Nathan McKinnon's, you see Connor McDavid's, you see technically Leon Draisaitl's, guys that are putting up, 90 to 100 plus points in a season, and you're wondering, well, is Nick Suzuki on that level? And there are first line centers, and then there are like superstar first line centers in this, and that Nick Suzuki, for the incredible hockey player that he is not Connor McDavid, is not Austin Matthews. He's definitely not Austin Matthews. He's won more than a single round of playoff hockey in his career. And it's not fair to put him on that same pedestal. He can be a very good first-line center. So I think that he is very much in that tier there. So we've seen year over year how Nick Suzuki has continued to grow, playing, bottom 6 minutes when he got here under Claude Julien, and then kind of slowly, he was here under Claude Julien before he was fired, and then slowly working his way up to being a guy who's playing 22, 23 minutes a night and thriving in that role. And you say, well, he's playing all the minutes. Of course he's going to get all the points. Yeah, but if he wasn't a good player, he wouldn't put up those points. He's putting up much better defensive metrics, or the best that he can with this, things that are inherent to a team that is not very good. The Canadiens aren't a great team. And I still look at the numbers that he's able to put up offensively. He, topped 30 goals this season. He set a new career high in points and everything else. And I don't know how you look at where he's at and don't say he's at first line center. 77 points in 82 games this year, 33 goals, 44 assists on a team that finished in the bottom 5. I'd say that's a pretty good number of things. And then in his career, 286 points in 373 games. I get that people maybe want to see him crack that 80-point barrier, that 90-point barrier. Of course, I want to see Nick Suzuki do that too. That also is beyond his control in some things. Yes, he can score more points, but this is a team that is in need of the depth behind him, which I know we will talk about in a little bit, that I think will help propel him to that level where people are a little more satisfied with that number they're seeing.
Right. And this is my thing, is that, do you think it's out of the realm of possibility that he hits that number? I don't think so. It's just, it depends on who he's playing with. It also depends on, honestly, some of the other weapons they put on the power play, because that adds a lot to the point totals of some of these other centers that Nick Suzuki gets compared to, right? I'm not talking about the Connor McDavids, the Austin Matthews. And this is the thing. It's like, we always have to remember that not every team has access to a generational talent like that, right? It's a handful of teams at best. Like Pittsburgh had Sidney Crosby, right? Edmonton has Connor McDavid, and Nathan McKinnon is another one. You have that like top 5 group, and then everyone else is much further behind, no matter what, even if they are the top center for their team, even if they are a top 10 or top 15 center in the NHL, they're still not as good as that upper echelon of extreme talents. And so it's not fair to compare Nick Suzuki to a talent like that. And that's a talent you only get once, and the year the Canadiens drafted first, there was Shane Wright, but he wasn't that type of talent, and everyone knew he wasn't that type of talent, right? So for me, that like first line center where it's a generational talent, it comes by once every few years. It's not even every year. Like not every year has a number one like pick that is that good, that is generational. So I think everybody needs to tone down that expectation from Nick Suzuki. But at the other end of the spectrum, like Scott said, the Canadiens weren't good. 1, their power play wasn't good. 2, they had a lot of injuries. 3, they only moved up Juraj Slafkovsky to his line pretty late in the season for him to be able to contribute to that 90-point total, right? Like, I know it was Slafkovsky's breakout year, but we're only expecting more from that, right? And once Cole Caulfield figures out his stuff, it's going to work out. Like, he's going to get that point total. Like, we have absolutely no reason to believe that Nick Suzuki can't crack the 80-point or 90-point barrier. Like, that, to me, is where I stand on that. And I understand that expectation too, but also people kind of talk a little bit about size, et cetera, et cetera. But Nick Suzuki is somebody who compensates for that, the fact that he's not like a 6'3", like 700-pound guy. He compensates for that with his intelligence and his reaction speed.
Yeah. And it's like you were saying about the whole draft order on things too, is that they missed out on Connor Bedard, who very easily could be that like superstar number 1 center. They didn't get him, and because they could not pick him. They didn't have the ability to pick him at that point. And I don't think Shane Wright was that guy when they did have the number 1 overall pick. And then this past year, Macklin Celebrini likely going to be a very good one. I don't know if he's going to be a superstar, and they drafted a guy on the wing that can do that. Is that it's very hard to find that generational superstar there. And people can say, well, Toronto has, John Tavares and stuff too. And I would say John Tavares was a star in his prime and is past that now, in that comparing
and
it to teams.
He was not at the level of a Connor Bedard, I don't think.
No, and the thing with all of this is that if you compare it to the highest points in the league, you are always going to be upset when they don't get there. If I continually compare Nick Suzuki to Austin Matthews, probably the best goal scorer in the league right now, or Connor McDavid, one of the best overall players, or Sidney Crosby in his prime, I'm going to be disappointed in that. And that is, first line center expectations are no longer 110 points. Hitting that 75 to 80 points puts you in a pretty good company of people, a lot of whom are first line top 6 players there. And I think Nick Suzuki is fitting right in that, honestly, that I'm not worried about it.
Right. And that's exactly it. And so coming up in our next segment, we are going to talk about who else is available to the Montreal Canadiens and what we're expecting from Kirby Dach. And that's coming up in just a moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Indeed. How often are you trying to hire and you find that it is so difficult to find the right candidates? So stop trying to hire and look for a match. And Indeed is here to help you. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. I myself can tell you that hiring is so hard when you want the right person for your team, because you really, really need that right person that fits, not just brings the skills. And so if you use Indeed, it's going to make it so much easier for you. It does everything for you. There's so many things. You can set your preferences, you can set the qualifications you're looking for, and you can find a great candidate really, really quickly. And all listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And what we need is to talk about the Montreal Canadiens depth chart. So, obviously, Kirby Dach suffered an injury the first game of the season. Was it in the first game of the season, or was it in preseason?
Second game of the season in like the first period.
The first period. It was just he did not have a chance to build on what he had done the previous year for the Montreal Canadiens. What he does have is he's got a little bit more size than Suzuki, right? There is that. And for me, like personally, I would not be upset if Kirby Dach were to push and earn a number one spot and he becomes the number one center, like depending on how things shake out, right? Like you've got to think about who's going to be playing with him. How many points is he going to be putting up? Does he have that defensive ability and responsibility that Nick Suzuki has? Is he going to be the guy that you want the opponents to throw their top competition against? So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I still feel that the way it's being positioned, particularly with Nick Suzuki's defensive, I'm not going to say like prowess might be a good word. I feel like it's still going to be Kirby Dach, second line center, but also playing with extremely good players. Like, you know, it's like now they filled out the Suzuki line. They got to figure out who's going to play on the Dach line. That's how I feel. I don't know. But at the same time, we got to remember that Dach and Slafkovsky found a lot of chemistry together. Mixing and matching that top six could give the Canadiens a lot of options. We don't know who Demidov is going to play with when he comes over. We don't know. Maybe Cole Caulfield will be more effective separated from Nick Suzuki. It hasn't proven to be true so far, but it's possible. So Scott, where do you think Kirby Dach is going to fall in that, I guess, top six?
I think he's your second line center, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Is that I look at what he did last year when he was healthy. He put up 38 points in 58 games on a very bad Canadiens team last year. 2 points in 2 games this year, obviously, with the knee injury that happened with that. For me, one of the biggest things is, and for me, I kind of look at that. I think he slides into that second line role. And like you said, who is he going to play with? We know he found some really good chemistry with Juraj Slafkovsky, which is important, but also Slafkovsky has seemingly found really good combination time with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. That it is nice that we have options for how we can customize the top six on this team now, instead of, well, you have to only do this because that's all we have. I think Alex Newhook will be there. I think Alex Newhook's going to be right on his left side. And I think that's an open spot potentially for either, if Yoel Armia is playing like he did at the end of last season, where he was a very good, strong winger on the boards, very good defensively to help assist with that, or Joshua Waugh, if he earns that spot directly out of camp. I think that is a very good open spot for him, because I think Waugh's got the creativity and Dach has the creativity and Newhook has a lot of skill to make that second line very special. And even if need be, you can shuffle pieces around. Maybe Newhook goes to your top line, and like you said, Caulfield slides down to the second line there, and they
I always
create.
forget Newhook. Poor guy. Like I
Yeah,
literally
well,
always forget he's there.
he was surprisingly their second line center through the back half of last year because we didn't have anybody else.
Everybody else was dead. Yes.
There's there's still so many options with that, and we don't know who's going to earn a spot out of camp. What is Ken Hughes going to do? I know that none of these trades have happened yet, but if there is a Natchez trade, if there is a Line trade, if there is a Zegras, if there is an Ehlers, if there is a McGroarty trade, any of these things, who's going to be gone and whose spot is going to open up in that? But I think Kirby Dach is right now your second line center, that guy to take some of those maybe defensive minutes away from Nick Suzuki just to give him a little bit of a break and free them up for more things. And even more importantly, another true second power play center. All respect to Christian Dvorak and Jake Evans and Alex Newhook. Probably not the best guys you want as your center on the power play. Newhook is fine as the winger, playing pretty well in that role, but as a center, no. But now you have Dach who can play in that role and use that frame and everything. He's the one that I'm most interested to see coming back this year, because if they can get a solid top six and then at third line with Evans, Gallagher, and Armia going again, I think you've got a pretty good looking team right there. Playoff team, maybe not, but competitive, a lot better. Yes. And I think that starts with one, Kirby Dach just being healthy again and not having a freak injury, like blowing out his knee in the second game, 4 shifts into it. Like, freak injuries followed the dude around, like snapping his wrist on a while getting cross-checked. Like, you can't help that. My hope is that he comes back and that we see that two-headed punch together again with Nick Suzuki, and they really kind of put something strong together there.
Right. And this is the thing, is that like for the last couple of years, a lot of the conversations that we've had have been centered around the fact that personnel just doesn't exist, or whoever does exist has been injured, right? Like, so we haven't really been able to get a good read on literally anybody on this team, except for Nick Suzuki. But really, like, like just what options they have, very, very much. So for me, like, all I want this season is, before even you talk about the young players that make this team either out of camp or throughout the course of the season, I just want to see consistency in terms of health so that we can just see what they have. Like, we just want to know what is available to the Montreal Canadiens. And as far as Kirby Dach goes, it's a quite interesting study, because like, we also have to remember that he's coming back from injury. So he might not be that 100% that he was the season before. And we had so many hopes and we were so excited about him. Like at the beginning, people were kind of apprehensive about the trade, et cetera, et cetera. And the other thing too, I'm kind of worried about, I know it's different injuries, but I'm just a bit worried about him being injury prone. I think in both scenarios, Scott, you've pointed out that it's kind of like a freak thing that you can't really help, but it happened, right? It's not really a Kirby Dach thing. It's more of a circumstances thing.
Yeah, like, how do you prevent a torn ACL when you get checked over the board by a dude who's bigger than you are? How do you like prevent a dude from cross-checking you in like the one spot between like the glove and where your elbow pad starts and it fractures it? Like, it's not like, oh, like Sean Monahan where he had all these injuries he had to rehab and stuff. That they're freak occurrences. It's just that they are severe freak occurrences that you can't do anything about it. And I think last year was, I believe it was a high ankle sprain or a knee sprain that is in his first season with the Canadiens, and that's tough. And high ankle sprains are annoying because it seems like a minor injury that takes forever to actually heal. So like, I get the concern about his knee or whatever injuries might be there, but sometimes just weird things happen, and that's the way it is. Sean Monahan was injured forever and somehow ended up with a 5-year contract out of it. So I'm like, it worries me a little bit, but not to the thing that I'm like, better wrap him in bubble wrap all the time. Just don't let him get checked by Jared Tenorti unexpectedly, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. and keep all the cheap shot artists away from him. All right, in our next segment, we're going to talk about some of the other centers around the league and whether or not Nick Suzuki is truly worse than all 31 of them. And that's coming up in just a moment. All right, Scott, I am realizing that this exercise is infinitely harder without Cap Friendly. Everything I ever want to do now, RIP Cap Friendly. So I was thinking, do we want to do it alphabetical order for the NHL teams and talk about their centers?
It's probably best if we just run it straight down that, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So let's start with, oh my God, we don't have Arizona anymore.
I was going to say we're on to
Yeah.
I almost said Atlanta. Jesus.
No, it's Anaheim. We start with Anaheim. Who knows who's on Anaheim?
Well, I want to say Anaheim's top line center is supposed to be Trevor Zegras, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of conversation around Trevor Zegras in this market, and there are still people commenting that Kent Hughes should stay away or should try to get him. So let's just leave that one up in the air. I believe the next team up is the Boston Bruins. Boston, is it Brad Marchand?
No. I believe the Bruins top line center was Pavel Zacha. It'll be Elias Lindholm this year, who just signed a 7-year deal. So,
okay. So, all right. And then we've got Buffalo.
Tage Thompson.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thing on Tage Thompson. Did he take a step back this year, or am I imagining it?
He did, but also Buffalo was a mess in a lot of ways, in that Tage Thompson was injured, tried to play through the injury, and their power play just didn't click like the way that it did last year. Is that Buffalo suffered regressions at probably the worst possible time for themselves, and the vibes were not good. Basically, they couldn't outscore their problems like they did last year.
Right. Okay. So then after Buffalo comes the Calgary Flames in a perpetual rebuild. What do we say about the Calgary Flames?
They are rebuilding, for one thing. It's going to break our dear friend Mike Vale's heart when they potentially trade Mikael Backlund at some point as their captain and one of their best players ever. Their top two center options on this team are Backlund or Nazem Kadri. Those are, and I love Nazem Kadri, but he's also now 33. He still has 5 years left on his deal at $7 million. So that's a team that I'm looking at this and going, I think the Canadiens are currently better off at the center position than they are.
Okay, so now we've gone through 5 teams, or we're on our 5th team, Carolina Hurricanes. No, we've done 5 teams. We've got one who's potentially better than Nick Suzuki.
Oh, I'm going to say this too, is that I think Nick Suzuki is better than Elias Lindholm. And I'm not saying the Canadian center depth is better than the Bruins, but I think Nick Suzuki is better than Lindholm, yes.
Okay, so Carolina Hurricanes.
Sebastian Aho. It's Sebastian Aho.
Okay. So, all right, we're gonna move on to Chicago real quick because they've got Connor Bedard, and then go to the Colorado Avalanche, Nathan MacKinnon, and then the Columbus Blue Jackets. Let's talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets.
I suppose we could always ask our good friend Jay who their top line center is, because it could be Boone Jenner because he's their captain and he's one of their longest tenured players. It could be Adam Fantilli, who is their young and rising star here. It could be Sean Monahan, who they just signed for $1 bajillion. They played Patrick Laine at center previously. It's a team that I do not know because they currently do not have a coach either. So I'm gonna default.
Also, they've got Caden Lindstrom coming up, but
yeah.
So I think in terms of Fantilli and Lindstrom coming up, like in the future, potentially Columbus has better centers than Nick Suzuki, but currently in today's world, they are not there yet.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. And I think people would agree with that, but the potential is there to be up there easily.
Dallas Stars. I think Dallas Stars objectively. What's his name?
Wyatt Johnston's in here. Rupe Hintz is in here. Wyatt Johnston's on his way up, kind of like Nick Suzuki was, and could very well be in that tier this year. Rupe Hintz is very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
I would say he's definitely up there because Jason Robertson is not a C. He's a winger. I just want to take a look at his stats this past year for Dallas. He put up 65 points in 80 games on a more stacked team. He didn't score as much as Suzuki, but I think he's a very good player. So I would still put Suzuki and Hintz probably on that same line there.
Edmonton Oilers, we're going to blow past that. They've got Connor McDavid. Florida Panthers.
You just straight up skipped Detroit, by the way.
Did I? Did I even
Yes.
have a person there?
Yeah, Dylan Larkin is their top line center.
Okay, well, I love Dylan Larkin, actually.
As do I. I think that he is maybe just a step below Nick Suzuki, just at where their careers are going, but has the opportunity to turn around and snap right back into that spot as well.
Yeah. So maybe we put them in like kind of the same tier, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And then Florida Panthers, Stanley Cup
Barkov.
winning. Yeah.
It's I'm not even going to bother. They won the Stanley Cup for a reason. They're a very scary, deep team down the middle too. So.
And then we've got the LA Kings.
Well, they've got Kopitar, they've got Danault. I swear they had somebody else playing center here. I thought that Adrian Kempe was a center, but I guess I'm wrong on that. Oh, they have Quentin Byfield, who is their fast rising star here. Byfield very likely will potentially be at or surpass Suzuki this upcoming season, and I'm not too broken up about that.
Yes.
Kid's a stud. Yeah,
and it's like I think LA's in that spot where like Kopitar was miles better than Suzuki in his prime, but he's not in his prime, and then Byfield is up and coming, but he's not there yet, right?
Yes.
So like this year maybe, but I know the team was the question was more about options. All right, okay, real quick, Minnesota Wild.
Joel Eriksson Ek is their top line center. He's a really good player, kind of potentially a very underrated player. 64 points in 77 games this year, 61 and 78 last year. I think he is in that same spot Suzuki was in, that they are waiting for more of this team around him to take that next step. But Minnesota's a weird team in that they are both competitive and non-competitive at the same time, and I don't know how to process any of that. So.
And next team up is the Montreal Canadiens. Is Nick Suzuki better than Nick Suzuki?
Depends on who you ask in this fan base.
And then the Nashville Predators, who they signed Steven Stamkos this year. So
yeah, you have Stamkos, you have O'Reilly, Tommy Novak, Colton Sissons, Cody Glass, Michael McCarron.
They're going to be a good team this year.
They're a very good team this year. I don't know if Stamkos is still the same guy that he was before, but he put up 81 points in 79 games this year with 40 goals, and he's still one of the best goal scorers in the NHL, who had a down year. Unfortunately, I will give them that nod that, yes, they have a true center there.
The New Jersey Devils. Do we even want to talk about them?
No, it's Jack Hughes. Move on.
The New York Islanders.
This would be Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat. I think that Nick Suzuki and Matt Barzal actually fall very close. Matt Barzal's played at a point per game pace, but he's had some down years as well. I think Nick Suzuki's going to hit that point per game pace next year and put him in that same spot there.
What about the Rangers?
I believe it's Mika Zibanejad, who is very, very good, probably a tier above Nick Suzuki right now.
Yes. Absolutely. And then we've got our favorites, the Ottawa Senators.
I'm not even touching this with a 10-foot pole, so I'm moving on from that.
Is it still Claude Giroux? I don't know.
It's Tim Stützle, who upon hearing his name has fallen down. So,
and then the Philadelphia Flyers.
Sean Couturier looks like their top line center right now.
He's on his way down. I love Sean Couturier. I worshipped Sean Couturier for a while, but yeah.
What a weird looking team. I don't know what this team's going to be. I'm going to say Nick Suzuki is better than Sean Couturier right now based on points.
Pittsburgh Penguins.
It's Sidney Crosby. We can just keep moving.
Without Sidney Crosby, it's also Evgeny Malkin.
Which again, we'll keep going here. Yeah.
Our friends, the San Jose Sharks.
It'll be Macklin Celebrini this year. I'm withholding judgment because I haven't seen Celebrini or Will Smith play at the NHL level. If we're talking about players that were on the roster beforehand, it doesn't matter. Nick Suzuki clears.
Right.
JD, I love you, but you know this to be true.
And then St. Louis Blues.
You skipped Seattle.
Did I?
Yes.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad.
Seattle's top line center, I believe, is still Jared McCann, who is one of those very underrated players. He put up 62 points in 80 games last year, 70 and 79 the year before that, 50 and 74 before that. Playing a lot of heavy defensive minutes. I think Nick Suzuki overall is better, but I think Jared McCann is very deserving of respect and attention in that regard.
The Tampa Bay Lightning. So now that they've...
Now you skip St. Louis.
Now I skipped St. Louis. I'm so sorry. It's a Sunday morning. We're all going to die.
It's
okay.
I don't know who it is between Thomas, Shen, or Buchnevich. I think all three of them are very good. I think Braden Shen is on the downside, but I think Robert Thomas is still on the upside. Heading into the upside of his career. He had 86 points in 82 games last year. I think right in that tier with Suzuki, but Thomas has that point edge that I think Suzuki is striving to get next year.
Right. Okay, so now the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Their top line center is now Braden Point with Steven Stamkos gone. Braden Point's obviously very good, tier above Suzuki.
Yeah. And then you've got the Toronto Maple Leafs, Austin Matthews. Let's move on. The Vancouver Canucks.
You skipped Utah now.
No, I didn't.
Yes.
Oh, I put them at the bottom of my list. For whatever reason, I thought U came after W.
I was like, I'm singing the ABCs in my head. I believe Logan Cooley is their top line center. Suzuki and Slavkovsky clear. Deal with it. Hopefully their Twitter admin is smarter about that than anybody else.
Yeah. So then now we go to the Vancouver Canucks.
Elias Pettersson is tier above. JT Miller potentially tier above, which is a hell of a redemption story for him.
Right. And then Vegas Golden Knights.
Jack Eichel. It's tier above. Washington Capitals, Pierre-Luc Dubois is their top line center
right now. So
and Nick Suzuki's better than Pierre-Luc Dubois currently. So
and then the Winnipeg Jets finally with the coward Mark Scheifele.
Yeah, no matter what, he's unfortunately a very talented player who puts up points, but also I hate him, so I'm gonna say Nick Suzuki is a tier above.
So then we've got the generational talent tier with the Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Sidney Crosby, Connor Bedard maybe. And then we've got the Zibanejad, Braden Point kind of tier. And then we've got the other tier, and Nick Suzuki falls in with all of the other people there. So like the majority of the NHL is there. So I don't think that there are 31 centers in this league that are better than Nick Suzuki.
Yeah. This is a year for him to take that step ahead. So
yeah, and to get into that Braden Point Zibanejad tier, right?
Yep.
And again, Tim Stützle not in that like upper tier; it's in that middle tier. So, if he can manage to stay up, all right. So that's our episode for today. We want to thank Jeffers for this episode idea. We still haven't tackled the Craig Rivet trade. I actually wanted to put together some more trade trees and talk about that kind of stuff for a future episode. We also have some draft experts coming up to analyze. And then we also have Sebastian and Hattie, some segments from them that we will be featuring this week and talking about them. So please make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Also, make sure you follow us on social media, LO_Canadiens. I'm at The Active Stick. Scott is at Scott Matla. Please subscribe, tell your friends, etc., etc. And if you ever want to send us your topic ideas, you can leave them in the YouTube comments. You can send them to us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com, or you can tweet them at LO_Canadiens. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.